Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Kid Stories Podcast. I'm Phil Bechtel. Let's get into a shout-out. Ezra is a big fan and has a birthday coming up on June 3rd. Happy birthday, Ezra. I hope for your birthday you get a magic ink pen that can turn into a sword, and an amulet that lets you turn into a bear, and a button that turns your actual house into a bouncy house, and a big bucket of goofballs. I think if you were a character in the stories, you'd be the leader of a small tribe of tree beasts that lives on the island of the Lady in the Lake on the dark side. Thanks for listening, Ezra. Today's episode is titled The Dangers of Reading Again, Part 6. The architect confidently led the group through the Impenetrable Castle. He had committed every room and hallway to memory since he was the one who built the place. There were some traps and some quick battles with mud beasts, but it was no problem, since they saw it coming. The architect knew what was around every corner. Eventually, after an impossible amount of walking, they reached the base of a huge stone spiral staircase. "Well, here we are," said the architect. "This is the main tower. Up there is a massive room where Malachi casts his spells and, I don't know, just hangs out, I guess." "Final boss battle?" asked Jameson. "Final boss battle," confirmed the architect with a nod. "Wait a minute, what else is up there?" asked Calynn. "Are there, traps and stuff up there?" "No traps, no, but he had me install a bunch of wizardy things like summoning tables and spell libraries and mixing stations and pretty much anything cool that a bad guy could possibly want." "Okay, then. Let's each get a power crystal and then we can get after this guy." Calynn opened up her bag of crystals to hand them out. "Okay, who wants what?" she asked. "Fireballs," said Jameson. "Can I get another one that turns me into a monster?" asked Dylan. "Yeah, but just a heads up, when you take the monster ones, you never know what kind of monster you're going to get turned into. It could be the same as last time, it could be different, I don't know," said Calynn. "That's cool," said Dylan. "Can I do a speed one?" William asked, and Calynn nodded and tossed him a crystal. "What are you getting?" he asked her. "My favorite," she said. "Punching." The kids all took their power crystals. "Hey, while we're waiting here, we're all probably pretty hungry from our journey, right? And we're going to need some energy to," the architect began. "Do you want some more cookies?" Dylan interrupted. "Oh, great idea. More cookies sounds great. Yes, thank you," the architect said. The kids unzipped their bags and dug around for their very last snacks. "Well, we already finished the cookies, remember?" said William. "But I think we got some crackers and some jerky." After their snack, they headed up the stairs to the lair of the Mad Warlock. The stairs were wet, mossy stones, and they spiraled up and up and up. The kids' thighs burned by the time they reached the top. A huge wooden door, half open, allowed a little peek into the lair. They heard lightning somehow coming from the room. They silently peeked in and saw, in the middle of the room, a huge mud beast. The biggest they'd ever seen. A mud beast so big that it wouldn't even fit through most of the hallways here in the castle. Mud from the floor of the room was rising up in long strands and sticking to the beast, adding to its size. Rainless storm clouds hung in the air above the beast, and small trails of lightning struck the monster. The architect held up 3 fingers, and then 2, and then 1. A second later, the group burst into the room, surprising the Mad Warlock. Instantly, Jameson began pelting the huge mud beast with fireballs as he ran to the other side of the room. The other kids turned and got a look at Malachi. He looked like a human, but his face was covered in mud. He wore a long wizard's robe with the hood pulled back. Mud dripped down from the top of his head. His arms stuck out in front of him as magic wafted from his fingers and swirled around the mud beast in the middle of the room. They clearly interrupted him in the middle of creating this monster. In that split second before they attacked, the kids wondered if the Mad Warlock was in fact made of mud himself. Even his hands and fingers were thick, shiny brown mud constantly dripping, and 2 red eyes flickered behind his brown sludge face. Before Malachi had a chance to break his mud beast creation spell, William sped around the room. To him, everything seemed to be moving in super slow motion. To everyone else, he was a blur. He grabbed a crystal ball from a table, and as he raced by the Mad Warlock, he launched the heavy ball right at his face. The thick glass ball smashed into the Warlock's face, and mud splashed everywhere. The Warlock stumbled and fell down to one knee. As the others descended upon the evil wizard, they watched as mud smooshed up from all around him, enveloping the crystal ball, kind of swallowing it into himself. And then he stood up again, looking around for his first target. Dylan activated his powers, and instead of turning into a raging monster like before, he turned into a giant griffin. Like a combination of a lion and an eagle, Dylan now had 4 powerful legs, each with the sharpest claws, 2 big wings, and the head of a bird with a dangerous beak. As Dylan swooped in to attack, the Warlock swung his hands up into the air. A thick chunk of mud from the ground whipped up in defense. Dylan, not used to flying just yet, tried to dodge the mud tentacle and ended up slamming into the wall. The architect was using his powers of creation and destruction to send objects flying at the Mad Warlock. Tables and bricks and stones slammed into the evil wizard, and his mud body would get knocked apart, only to be reformed seconds later. Meanwhile, Calynn leaped in the center of the room to attack the giant mud beast there. While Jameson launched fireballs high up at the beast's head, Calynn stood on the floor, punching giant chunks of gross mud sludge to the ground. Jameson kept the beast busy swatting at his fireballs, and soon Calynn had super-punched the beast's legs into a puddle, and it toppled over. Finally, she climbed up on the nasty thing and leaped up to its head, bringing both fists down hard and turning the rest of the creature into a sloppy mess. "Ow, ow, hot mud," she cried, and shook her hands to sling the hot mud away from her and cool off. "Sorry about that," Jameson said as he ran to help the others with the Mad Warlock. The others were having a tough time fighting the Warlock. Every time Dylan would try and swoop in to attack him, these long tentacles of mud would reach up from the ground and swat him or wrap around his winged body. Dylan kept having to slice his way out of the mud with his claws and retreat to try again. The Warlock began summoning the mud to wrap around William's feet, slowing him down. And everything the architect threw at him was blocked by mud shields the Warlock instantly created from one of his hands. Jameson and Calynn joined Dylan and William behind a brick barrier that the architect created as cover. "How's it going?" Jameson asked. "It's going, this guy is invincible. That's how it's going," Dylan snapped. "Every time we damage him or attack him, he just fixes himself with mud. How can we defeat a wizard who's basically a mud puddle?" The architect ducked down below the barrier as the Warlock blasted it with mud bombs. "He's not the same as before," the architect said. "He doesn't even have a face. He isn't even saying words. He's just moaning and grunting. I think his own magic has corrupted him. He's not a person anymore. He's just evil mud." "Yeah, evil, powerful mud," added William. "How do we defeat evil mud?" "I've got to bring the place down," said the architect. "It's the only way." "You mean destroy the castle?" asked Calynn. "I'd prefer you not do that while we're in it." "Dylan, you've got to fly everyone out of here," the architect said. "You too?" Dylan asked. "I'll be fine. I can create a stone shield for myself, I think," said the architect. "I'll go down with the castle, but I'll be protected." "I don't know," began William, but he was interrupted. "It's happening," yelled the architect. "Get out of here." The architect stood back from the barrier, and his hands glowed blue. Bricks and stones from the floor and walls vibrated out of place. Some just fell to the ground and others spun to the Warlock. The Warlock was launching mud tentacle attacks at the architect as well. And as more and more stones and bricks fell out of place, the entire tower shook. "Time to go," yelled Dylan. He took the other 3 in his massive claws and fell out a window. His wings swept open and they swooped up in the air. They landed on a mountain ledge not far from the castle. The 4 kids sat and watched as the entire castle, Miles and miles of dungeon and towers and millions of bricks and stones all rumbled and fell apart, crashing in on itself. The event was so intense that the entire mountain range shook, and tremors were felt in all the nearby towns and villages. It was icy cold up on the mountain, but the kids stood and looked over the edge, wondering what became of the architect. Far below, in the rubble of the Impenetrable Castle, a pile of bricks seemed to open up, and the architect stumbled out. He looked all around and waved at the kids, perched high above. The kids waved back. "I am absolutely freezing," Dylan said, having turned back to his human form. "We should get out of here." He pulled the magic book from his bag. "Do we get to do ice cream and video games now?" Calynn asked. "Yep, ice cream and video games," said Dylan. The kids read the book until they were sucked right into the pages. The end. Thanks for listening, friends. The website is kidstoriespodcast.com. Send all your drawings and things to kidstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Adios.